Hey, this is Zach with the City on a Hill podcast. I'm the youth director at Grace Baptist Church in Coatesville, Indiana, where this message was recorded live during one of our youth services. I hope you will find this to be a blessing. I hope it uplifts you, and I hope it'll help you to grow closer to our Savior. Enjoy the message.
And we learned about how Joseph basically is thrown into a pit by his brothers. He has a nice colorful coat. His brothers take his coat and frame an animal for killing Joseph. They go to his dad, tell his dad that Joseph was dead. They hated their brother, so they try to kill him. Don't actually kill him. They sell him into slavery. Joseph goes off to Egypt. He is a slave in a man named Potiphar. Or not, he's technically a slave. He's more of a servant in a guy named Potiphar's house for a little while. And then Potiphar's wife accuses Joseph of committing sin. And then Joseph is put into prison. So where we left off last week, we did a little bit. I gave you guys a little bit of information 2 weeks ago about the prison that Joseph was at. You guys kind of remember that a little bit. We talked about the prison, how in Egyptian prisons at that time, when you were sentenced, there was no sentences. You were either there until you were killed, or you were there for the rest of your life. And that really changes the way we look at that. We're going to look at that a little bit tonight as well. But what that means for Joseph is Joseph has been wrongly accused. He has been at the top serving in Potiphar's house, a very, very wealthy man in Egypt. He is wrongly accused, taken back out of Potiphar's house, put into a prison where he will likely be there the rest of his life. And where our story picks up tonight is he has been in this prison for somewhat of an amount of time. And we have, in Genesis 40, we have this story that picks up that is the beginning of Joseph's rise to get out of the prison. So let's look at Genesis 40. Let's look at verse number 1. It says, "And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound." Let me stop it for a second. You guys remember last time I was talking about the prison. You guys remember that Joseph got elevated to the highest point in the prison. So he is already at that point by the time this happens. He has been thrown into prison, wrongly accused, and by this point, he is already the number one guy in the prison. That's like taking somebody that goes into prison, taking them out, and then making them like a warden of the prison is basically what happens to Joseph. And so Joseph is over this prison, and then these guys come in. Verse number 4, "And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continue to season in the ward." So Joseph is over these two men that are placed in here. This is kind of where we're at. I'm not going to read the rest of it for time's sake, but basically what we have here is these two men have two dreams, okay? We have the butler has a really crazy dream, and the baker has a really crazy dream. What we have here is the butler's dream. He brings it to Joseph. He's telling Joseph about his dream, and Joseph interprets the man's dream. This is not something that happens anymore, okay? God doesn't work through that way anymore. But back at this point in time, God worked through people with dreams. You guys remember Joseph had a few dreams before he was sold off that made his brothers a little angry. You guys remember that? When Joseph had the dreams about how his brothers would bow down to him. Not a great thing to say to your brothers that already hate you. But he has these dreams. And so this man knows about this, or knows about Joseph's history with dreams. And so he brings this dream to him and asks him, what does it mean? What does this dream mean, Joseph? And for the butler comes first, and Joseph says, good news, your dream means that you're going to be put back into Pharaoh's palace. You're going to be back, you're going to be reinstated, you're going to be a butler, which keep in mind, again, they didn't have sentences. Okay, so this was world-changing for this guy to think that he was going to get out of here. And this guy is excited. He is happy he's going to get out, all this. And then Mr. Baker has a different story. He comes to Joseph and he says, "Hey, Joseph, interpret my dream. His dream turned out good. What's my dream mean?" And basically Joseph says, "Well, Baker, your dream means basically that you're going to be hung for your crimes and you're going to die." I'm sure the baker's like, what in the world? Like, come on. So anyways, exactly what Joseph says happens. The baker is taken out, he is hung, he is killed, and the butler is put back into Pharaoh's house. You say, why in the world does that matter? Why do I need to know the story? It's incredibly important. Because right before the butler leaves to go back to Pharaoh's palace, Joseph says, hey, when you get back to Pharaoh, tell him about me. Okay, just tell him. He says, I was wrongly accused. Just tell him about me. Try to get me out of here, okay? Butler is excited. He gets out of the prison. and the first thing he does is tell the Pharaoh about Joseph, right? No, not at all. He completely forgets about Joseph. And Joseph sits there for 2 years. 2 years, waiting around for the Pharaoh to come back and tell him, hey, this butler guy came, told me you were innocent, I'm going to get you out. And that never happens. Joseph sits there for 2 whole years, okay? Here's something that I want you guys to learn about that. God doesn't work on our timing, okay? That's very important for you guys to understand. Because for us, the Bible says that a day to the Lord is as 1,000 years, or other way around. 1,000 years to the Lord is as a day. Basically, for that to say, God's timeline, God is not submitted to our timeline, okay? So when we look at a timeline, when Joseph sits there and he thinks, I have been here 2 years for something I didn't do, God doesn't see that as 2 years. Why? Because God's not limited by our time. He's so much bigger. He's so much greater than our time. God understands our time. Okay, that's not to say that God doesn't see us as having to deal with that amount of time. That's what I'm trying to say. But God is not limited to our time, and He will use our time to teach us and to mold us in certain ways. We don't know the reason why God made Joseph wait 2 years there. But it's very likely that God had some sort of a reason to prepare Joseph for what he was about to do next. Maybe he was testing Joseph, maybe, to see if he would actually stay faithful to God. Think about that. For likely 3 to 4 years, Joseph was sitting there. Think about you guys 3 to 4 years ago. Where you're at. How old were you guys like 3 to 4 years ago? Somebody tell me, like, how old were you? 12? Okay, think about from the time you were 12 to the time of now. How much time has passed? Okay? I want you to think about being wrongly accused, being in prison that whole time, and staying faithful to God through that whole time. Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. But I believe maybe God is testing him in this time to prepare him what's coming next. We talked about a little bit before, 2 weeks ago, about how God will put us in the lower parts of our life so that we have to get stronger so that we can get up over the next level that he has. And if you are following that process right, you will continually be able to conquer greater and greater things. Like on a roller coaster. I hate roller coasters. You guys like roller coasters? I hate roller coasters. But anyways, when you get in a roller coaster, when you go down, it takes you really far down so that what? So that you have the momentum to get back up, right? If the roller coaster, I'm not talking about like the mechanized ones, but if you had a roller coaster that was just flat continuously and then it just went up, would it be able to go up? No, it doesn't have any momentum. So what God does in our lives, like what he does in Joseph's life, is he will take Joseph like when he is in the pit, okay? When his brothers throw him in the pit, he takes him way down to test him, to build him up, to strengthen him. And then he uses that momentum to put him up into Potiphar's house so he can rule over Potiphar's house. Then what happens? Right back down, right back into prison. He's building him up for what's to come next. And I'm telling you guys, what comes next is way bigger than anything else he's dealt with. And he is building that momentum so that he can tackle what's coming next. He'll do that in your life too. Just because you're at the bottom, first of all, it doesn't mean you're going to stay there. And second of all, it doesn't mean that it's pointless. It doesn't mean not always, that you've sinned, that you've put yourself there. Joseph didn't do anything to cause himself to be there. It may be that God is just preparing you for what's to come next. And it's incredibly important how you react when you're in that spot. Joseph could have had such a sour attitude. Man, think about it. The first time his brothers throw him in that pit, Joseph starts grumbling and complaining and groaning and all that. You really think God's going to help him to go do other things? No, he's going to get somebody else. But because Joseph had the right attitude, and he actually served God through it, he was able to continually build up to better things. So all that to say, here's what happens next in Joseph's life. Things get really, really good for Joseph. Look at your Bibles, Genesis 41, verse number 28. See, I'll put it up on the screen here. Okay, let's see. Genesis 41, 28. We're going to read 28 through 43. Says this. Let's see. Hold up. I need to give a little backstory before we get there. So let me back up a little bit. After those 2 years pass, okay, Joseph is in the prison after 2 years. The butler is reinstated. The baker has been hung. After about 2 years, the Pharaoh has dreams, okay? He has two dreams, similar to the baker, similar to Joseph. He has two dreams that are troubling to him. They are so troubling. You guys ever had a dream and like you woke up and like you don't know what it meant, you don't know anything, but just like bothered you? This is like times that by 10, okay? This is what the Pharaoh is dealing with. He has these dreams and he can't get anybody to explain it to him. It's funny, there's a common theme in the Bible of people in power having dreams and not being able to understand it and trying to get other people to explain it and they can't explain it. and then they usually either kill him or get really mad or throw him out. For some reason, that's a very specific storyline that happens a lot in the Bible. But Pharaoh has these dreams, and he can't figure it out. He gets all of his intelligent men to try to explain it. They can't figure it out. So what happens is Mr. Butler, the guy that forgot Joseph for 2 years, he says, wait a minute, I had a dream once. There was this guy, he interpreted it, and it came true. All right, and Pharaoh's like, well, let's get this guy. So he goes over, he gets Joseph, pulls him out, and he tells Joseph about these dreams. Okay, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to get through what all the dreams were. But Joseph comes and interprets the dream. Look at Genesis 41, verse number 28, says this. This is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. He says, Pharaoh, good news. You're going to have 7 years of really, really good times. You're going to have lots of food, lots of wealth, all these things. And verse number 30, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. I'm sure Pharaoh's like, I just picture Pharaoh's face when Joseph's like, hey, Pharaoh, you're going to have 7 years of good times. He's like, oh, great. And then he's like, then you're going to have 7 years of famine, and it's all going to go away. It's like, come on. So we have this back and forth here. And this says that the famine is going to wipe out everything. It says, for it shall be very grievous. Verse number 32. And for that, the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now, therefore, let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. All right? So picture it like this, okay? Picture Joseph comes up. He's telling Pharaoh, he says, Pharaoh, you're going to have 7 years of really good time, really good wealth, all this. Then you're going to have 7 years of famine. And he's like, Pharaoh, by the way, God says to you that you need to pick somebody that's really wise, that's close with God, and that can figure this out for you. I can just see him like, Pharaoh, like somebody that's really wise. You know, he's like hinting at it. Okay, so this is kind of what's going on here. Verse number 34, let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt and the 7 plenteous years. So he's like, Pharaoh, if you pick somebody, they should probably do something like this. They should probably use the 7 years, put away all this stuff, so that you're okay in the next 7 years of famine, so you don't lose everything. Verse number 35, and let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. It's kind of like if you went to a job interview, and or not even that. It's like if you just walk up to a business, and they're like, hey, you should hire somebody, and they should do all this stuff I'm going to tell you that they should do, all right? That's basically what he's doing. He's kind of like pushing Pharaoh to give him the job. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. Look at verse number 37. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of all his servants. Like, great, sounds good. Sounds like a plan. And Pharaoh said unto his servants, can we find such a one as this is, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? He's like, who should we pick for this except this guy that just told us this whole plan of how we're going to fix this problem? He speaks, he can interpret dreams. He is a child of God. Who better can do this? And so he takes Joseph. I'm going to skip some of this for a sake of time. He takes Joseph and places him, get this, second in command of all of Egypt. Egypt is one of, if not the biggest nation on earth at this time. It's like this, okay? Donald Trump goes and gets a prisoner out of the prison. He says, hey, what should we do about this? And the prisoner says, yeah, you can do this. Do this. This will make sense. You know, you can do this, and this will fix your problem. And then Donald Trump makes him vice president. Okay? That's basically what you have here. He makes Joseph second in command over all of Egypt. All right? I want you guys to think about something, okay? And I may break this up a little bit because there's a lot of lessons here. I want you to think about something, okay? When Joseph gets to that spot, all right, he is at the lowest he could possibly be. When he gets to that spot, you don't think in an instant, when Pharaoh says, I want you to be number 2, you don't think in an instant Joseph looks back at all those years and he says, that makes sense, right? When he looks back at him getting thrown in the pit, and he's sitting there, and that night he's sitting in the pit, he's thinking, God, what in the world are you doing? For the years and years he's sitting in that prison, thinking, God, what in the world are you doing? There's no way any good can come out of this. I'm going to be here the rest of my life. You don't think in the instant the Pharaoh says, I want you to be second in command so you can literally save the entire country of Egypt. And, by the way, your own people, because they are getting their food from Egypt. You don't think that at that moment Joseph thought, wow, look at this plan. It's very rare that God allows somebody to see that plan that clear. you likely are not going to have a point in your time where you can look back at all the things you've dealt with and you will be able to see this is exactly why I led to that point. He let Joseph do it. Why? I don't know. Maybe because Joseph was such a good servant. He had the right heart. He had the right attitude, okay? And here's another thing you guys can learn from this. Just because you do things right doesn't mean that your lives are going to be easy. In fact, if you do things right, your life will be harder. You say, wait a minute, I don't want to do things right then. No, because you doing the wrong thing and thinking you're at that point of happiness, thinking you're at that point that's better, compared to doing the right thing, and maybe going in some valleys, maybe going in some deep parts, but where you end up doesn't even compare. See, because where you end up, where Joseph ends up, is actually true happiness, serving God, doing what he can. But if Joseph would have just grumbled, complained, done whatever he wanted, pushed God away, all this, he wouldn't have been able to do anything with his life. God wouldn't have used him. Because he was usable, because he took the initiative. I want you to see some characteristics of Joseph, okay? Joseph was mature for his age, very mature for his age. Can you imagine as Pharaoh, as a incredibly high up ruler in Egypt, putting at this point in time likely a 16, 17-year-old kid in charge of your entire house, everything? Joseph was mature. He was responsible. He was a good example. People he was around, they looked to him for advice. And again, at this whole time, Joseph, from the time the story starts to the time Joseph is put in Egypt, he is likely somewhere between 16 and about 25. The whole time, okay? So we're not talking about some 40, 50-year-old wise man, okay? This is a kid, and he is doing all these things. Here's what I want you to notice. Okay, God was the one that elevated him, but it was because of Joseph's character that God used him. There's a lot of Christians that think as long as I sit back, I do nothing, and I read my Bible, God's going to put me where I need to be. No, God doesn't work like that. You can't just sit on autopilot and God push you through life. You take the initiative. God sees the initiative, and he uses that, okay? That's so important for you guys to understand. It's not on God to make you choose the right decisions and to make you become a better person. That's your own decision, and God will help you with that along the way. It was because of Joseph's initiative that he was brought to the place where he needed to be. Here's another thing I want you to notice. Joseph was incredibly busy his entire life. When Joseph got to prison, wouldn't you expect, if this was you, and you thought, I'm going to be in prison the rest of my life. If I was going to prison the rest of my life, I would go there and I would probably just hang out, do nothing. Like, why would you? What's there to do? The second Joseph got to that prison, he started working. He started getting busy. He started serving God. Even when Joseph gets out of the pit, he goes to Potiphar's house. He could have just been a lousy servant and not done anything, but he works extra hard to get to the spot he can. And because he works, because he has the character, God uses him. It's on you guys to build the character. And if you have it, then God will use you. He'll use your character for it. He doesn't put the character in you. You got to raise up the character. He will use you for it, all right? So that's where we're going to stop tonight. Next week, we're going to look at how Joseph handles the famine. And if you guys don't know the story, I'm telling you guys, you could not write a Hollywood movie better than how this story plays out. Joseph meets up with his brothers next week. The ones that, well, not next week. Well, yeah, we'll be here next week. The brothers that threw him in the pit, Joseph's second in command in Egypt, he meets back up with him again. It's a great story. It's really good. So make sure you guys are here next week. We'll cover that. So that ends tonight. We're covering 5 weeks on Joseph. There's so much in the story of Joseph. I hope you guys are learning a lot from it. But let's go ahead and pray. And we got about 5 minutes. I want to do our reflect groups real quick, and then we'll be done for tonight.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the message, check out our other podcasts, share us with your friends, and check out our church at gracebaptistcoatesville.org. I hope this was a blessing to you. Thanks again for listening.